This morning is the Israel-Palestine session at this cover conference. And there are probably 3 dates we should be aware and make it very appropriate to have this session, at least the 3rd date. In this year, many people talk about that the conflict between Israel-Palestine, or the conflict in this area, is now going on for 100 years. That's the first date. The second date we should be aware of, that in this year we are remembering 60 years of the State of Israel. And the third date we should be aware of, that this year it is 5 years that we discuss the Israel-Palestine case in cover. 5 years ago at the cover conference in Innsbruck, Raimund Schwager gave a paper on this case, and he said, I would propose that cover should focus on this particular difficult political, religiously loaded case and try to find out, does cover have to contribute something or not? Can we contribute to change in this case? Can we contribute in any way? So we started a year later in 2004 with the help of Charles Selengut, and I will quickly introduce the speakers of the panelists to work on this case. And today is the last panel, the last session, according to Raimund Schwager's proposal of 2003. I think there are 2 main questions we have to address regarding Israel-Palestine. What has mimetic theory to offer? What can be seen in this case with the help of mimetic theory that is usually overlooked? And what has to be learned by scholars using mimetic theory going into this field? That's the first package of questions in some way. The second thing is, should we continue in any way this focus on Israel and Palestine? That's also part of the question we have to give an answer in any way this morning, or at least after this morning. I will introduce to you the speakers of this panel in the order they will speak. So they know the order, you know the order, and I know there are many of you who can contribute to this question very helpfully. So we will, after a short 10 minutes contributions of the panelists, open up the floor and try to answer some of those questions. However, I also think we should be modest. We will not solve this conflict today, and we should be modest, but try to find out, do we have to learn something? What did we learn? So the first speaker I want to introduce to you is Wilhelm Guggenberger, who is a professor in the Department of Systematic Theology, in the same department I work. He's specialized in Catholic social teaching, and the reason that he will be the first speaker is that he will summarize Raimund Schwager's initial contribution, initial proposal. It's good to remind ourselves after 5 years what was the proposal we were working on for 5 years. Willy Guggenberger is also personally dedicated. He is a friend of the Near East for a very long time, has been 3 times in Israel, but also in other countries of the Near East. So there is also an emotional, personal interest, and that's the reason that Wilhelm Guggenberger is the appropriate person to summarize Raimund Schwager's initial proposal. The second speaker will be Charles Selengut, who is a professor in the Department of Religious Studies a true university. He's the author of Sacred Fury, which came out for the first time in 2004. There's now a new second edition, expanded edition, which is on the book there. Charles Selengut was invited by Sandy Goodhart in 2004 to help us to address these questions. So I think he's the appropriate person to tell us what was the road we have been walking or driving or whatever, or stumbling sometimes, from 2004 until today. The third speaker should be Sandy Goodhart. He was one of those persons. We had a lot of contributors throughout those 4 years, and Sandy Goodhart was contributing at the first meeting at Ghost Ranch in New Mexico. Hopefully he will come. If not, we have to solve the problem without him. Our third, there's another speaker today who is missing. Maybe I talk with just a minute about Simon Simonse of Pax Christi, Netherlands, who is working now for a couple of years in Kenya, in Africa. He was very dedicated to this question. Last year he was responsible at least for 2 speakers, invitees, that spoke to those questions last year in the Netherlands. But he had to cancel his participation about a week ago because he has a lot of things to do in Kenya, and it is very difficult and really a long trip to go from Kenya to Europe and then from Europe to the United States. So a week ago he said he cannot come. Maybe we can bring in some of his observations which he wrote to me about these things. He's a field worker in conflict situations in Africa. He was a little bit modest and said, well, I'm not that sure that there is any help by mimetic theory, but we can discuss it again. So the next speaker is Sheila Treasury, and Sheila is a long-term member of Cover and a friend of us. Sheila is also particularly important to contribute to this panel today. She's first of all living in the United Kingdom, in Bradford, in one of those cities with 70% Muslim population. I met Sheila already twice at Bradford, and I know she is very much engaged in Christian Muslim dialogue. She's doing really a very wonderful work on local and global level, but her activity in this field is also closely connected to the Near East, to Israel-Palestine. So she did a MA on, if I'm correct, on Christian Zionism related to the situation in Israel and Palestine. She also frequently travels to Israel and Palestine, so she also contributes. And all of the speakers this year are fluent in mimetic theory, which is important for this conference, but also important for our task, because Raymond Schwager's initial proposal was, what has mimetic theory to say about those things? So Sheila is currently preparing a doctorate on the possibilities of mystical traditions in controlling desire. Very important thing. The last speaker is one of the oldest and first members of Cover. It's a good friend of mine in many sense. It's Byron Bland, and Byron Bland is Associate Director of the Stanford Center on International Conflict and Negotiation. So he is really related to an institution that has done for, you will tell us, probably more than 20 years, conflict resolution work in the field of Israel and Palestine. So even once shook hands with Arafat when he was there, and met Hannah Ashrawi and many other important key figures in this field. Byron Bland is also really one of the co-founders, if Jim Williams forgives me to be not very exact in these terms, but Byron was there from the very beginning at Stanford, helped us a lot to set up a cover, and at least helped me when I was editor of the bulletin, the first issues, that the English was English. So Byron also can contribute from the perspective